In fact, a year earlier, A.W. Venable of Granville County, North Carolina, declared that he would wipe up every drop of blood shed in the war with this handkerchief of mine. Naive words. In his most vivid and terrible nightmares, he never dreamed of 2 days like April 6th and 7th, 1862.
My camp was astounded one morning by the report that Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States, was dead. He had gone to a small theater in the city of Washington on the evening of Good Friday and had been shot by a madman. It seemed like a retribution that he should be cut off in the midst of the hosannas that were being shouted in his ears for all the destruction and ruin he had wrought upon 12 millions of people. Without any warrant for his conduct, he had made a war of rapine and lust against 11 sovereign states whose only provocation had been that they had made an effort to preserve the liberties which had been handed down to them by their fathers. These states had not sought war but peace, and they had found at the hands of Abraham Lincoln destruction. As a Christian, it was my duty to say, Lord, have mercy upon his soul, but the devil will surely take care of his memory.
I've seen dozens of arguments online or wherever, people arguing if Lincoln was a good guy or a bad guy, or if the war was fought over states' rights or slavery. I personally believe that's a very stupid argument. Should never even be brought up, whether the war was fought over slavery or state rights, because 150, 160 years later, we don't have that ability to discern it. The war was definitely started because of issues caused by slavery. But as far as individual people fighting, very few of them went to war over slavery. See, the issue between North and South as far as was this legitimate war is very simple. Reading that just took place was, he was talking about the commander of the ship, the Alabama, Sims, and he said all we wanted was the freedoms passed down to us by our forefathers. True statement. Nothing illegitimate about that. But we now believe that slavery was wrong. Therefore, it's justified to take away someone's freedoms who were passed down from their forefathers. I agree with that. But we can't fault the person trying to protect them in a time where that was acceptable, because how could they have known better unless they were a very forward and outward free-thinking people? Only 10% of people change their minds when presented with reason and evidence. Stephen Molyneux, one of our era's greatest philosophers. If that is the case, and I'll make the argument for that if you want, if that's the case, then what we're saying is only the free and forward-thinking people are justified. And that's like people like you and I. Hopefully you're free and forward-thinking people, but you know that we're justified. I actually do believe that only the free and forward-thinking people are justified, but I don't think the ones who aren't are damned. Those clinging to the common belief of the age, of their society, of their media, the narrative believers, those people are evil. I'll make the argument for that too. In a deeper sense, I know that they're just being human. They're being human, and if we want to judge them harshly, then history will judge us harshly. I say that with a grain of salt. When presented with reason and evidence, they do need to change their minds. If they do not, history shouldn't judge them harshly in the way that it would in some cases, but they are justified in being heavily criticized. All these things are very nuanced, but it's not all black and white. if you want to be a mind reader and say, even though these men did not go to war to defend slavery in person, that was the underlying cause, therefore they should have known that, and therefore they were to blame for going to war, is foolishness. And most likely, you yourself would have done the same thing, because you're not thinking like a free-thinking person. You're thinking that you would have been different than the average person in that time. In any person, the era of any single individual, a free-thinking person thinks different than the common narrative. And today, it's popular. It's the common narrative to say that the war was absolutely fought over slavery, and anyone who says different is delusional. Let's say this. I believe our United States government is corrupt as hell. I believe that they are funding the war in Ukraine for personal benefit. The money's being laundered, brought back in here, and other various reasons. But if Russia attacks the United States and I fight back against them, would people in history remember that and say, oh, you were supporting a corrupt government? The war was fought over fraudulent issues and corruption. So therefore, if you fought for that war, you supported that. That's ridiculous, and we all know it. You don't bring those kind of things up when discussing issues from the past. That's what I would like to say about criticism of that time. The people that criticize it are likely the ones that would have perpetrated it, because obviously they're not free thinkers. In my opinion, Abraham Lincoln was a great man, but I fully 100% understand anyone who thinks he wasn't, because people looked at the country differently then than now. Each state was a sovereign state, and it was the collective United States of America. The term would be used, we would say, the United States is going to go to war with Iraq. Back then they would have said, the United States of America are going to war with Iraq. It was from an are to an is. An are would indicate multiple states of America. And is would indicate one entity. So people were looking at the country differently then. And as you notice in that one reading there where he talks, after Abraham Lincoln died, he says, even though there's nobody alive today that would think that slavery was okay, but there's many people today who would say that abortion is a right passed down to us. And the time will come when those people will be looked at as evil, as there will be parts of society who want to wipe that away and say these were the worst humans on earth. But right now, it's not expedient to do that. Right now, nobody does that. They think it's okay because it's been the accepted narrative for years. But the time will come when that will not be accepted, I promise you that. But we can't fathom that today, that 100 years from now they will say any person who supported abortion was an evil person and their name should be wiped from history. They're saying the South fought because of slavery, regardless of the underlying facts for each individual. That was the central issue. Therefore, all these people should have known that, and they are to blame, and they're guilty. And they need to be wiped from the history books. And history judges you the way that you judge history. So I believe that will come to pass. Just to add to that one more time, that's the problem with conflicting ideologies. That's the problem with believing in a narrative. People must be aware there's always a false narrative. You may believe today that you believe the correct narrative, and you might, but remember, there is a false one as well. I got started making this video because of that first clip that's on there about wiping up all the blood shed in the Civil War with a handkerchief, but my mind goes fast and I go from issue to issue. But it ended up really what bothers me the most is this self-righteous attitude we're seeing today in the world among professors, among common people, and this guilt trip they try to put on people who identify or talk about the Confederate States and try to make them look like you're supporting slavery, which is just fraudulent. These same people are buying stuff from China. China is as much a slave state as the South ever was, and we support them. Even though, be it not intentionally, each individual, we buy their stuff. It's the same thing. So we support slavery today. It's hypocritical to act like we don't. And it's hypocritical to try to wipe from the history books a page of our history because we disagree with it. That's not the intent of history. The intent of history is to learn from it, not to justify it, criticize it, or condemn it.